Paul, we're...
Yeah, I don't know.
And I will ask first if there are public comments of a general nature not related to anything specific. Seeing none, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, PC 19-048, staff concurrence on a concrete block wall in the Kenema National Register Historic District. And before we do that, I am going to recuse myself from the discussion because the property in question is owned by Kenema Club, and I am a member and officer in Kenema Club, so I won't participate in this discussion. I'll let John chair the meeting for that portion of the discussion.
This one? Okay, sure. Do we need to call a roll or no? Doesn't matter?
No.
All right.
We'll be okay.
Okay, so,
Staff report.
yeah, staff report.
Nothing like jumping it out of it.
No worries.
So this is staff concurrence, which we use when there's a staff level decision we think is a staff level decision, but we just want to bring it to HRB just in case you all disagree and you think that it should not be a staff decision. If there is any concerns or that this doesn't really fall under staff's purview, then you can disagree, or you can decide that, it needs to come before HRB the next meeting, and then we would do the public notices and come next meeting. This has to do with the existing fence and wall policy. Our existing policy allows concrete block only in rear yards, side yards, and alleyways. So we have a property here that is what Ken referred to the Kenema Club property. It is along the waterfront here, and there is no structure on it, no historic structure, and because there's no structure, there's no real front yard or rear yard. So the definitions of front yard and rear yard are based on, in the front of a structure and behind a structure. So it was a little bit of a gray area as far as, whether a concrete block wall would be allowed on this property, or whether it should be considered more like a rear yard or a side yard. This is a zoomed in version of the area that we're looking at. There's a dock, a patio, and then a short concrete block retaining wall, and then the staircase is also made of concrete block. Majority of it is on between the railroad and the river. There's a small section of the stair that is on the interior side of the railroad track between First Avenue and the railroad, which I have a photo of in a minute. So staff's decision would be that this concrete block would be permitted because this property essentially functions as a rear yard. And most of the concrete block is not visible from any public area. So aside from the river, of course, but the river is outside of the historic district. The boundary is essentially the high water mark. So this is a view of the property from First Avenue, looking kind of from north and south. And then standing on First Avenue, looking directly at the property, you can see the concrete block stairs, and then the railroad tracks, and then a metal gate. And then the stairs continue down onto the patio. So that's really all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
What was the yellow boundary on the first slide?
So that's the entire property, and the stairs in question are right where the arrow is pointing.
And that's all owned by...
It's owned by the Kenema Club, and then
I've heard of that.
So what are they asking for if they already have blocks?
They're under code enforcement and trying to get into compliance for building the stairs and patio in the first place. So
It's been there for years, right?
How long is it?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but it was initiated by, I think, actually FEMA. So it was potentially a lot of fill, not a lot, but some fill was brought into the floodplain. So there's development in the floodplain that wasn't permitted through any sort of local permitting process. And that made the city out of compliance with FEMA regulations because we have requirements for floodplain development. But this had been done, the work had been done years ago before the property was sold to the current owners.
So right now it's just, is the board okay with how it is? And do you need a vote for that or
That's
just
exactly
like
right.
everybody's just
You don't
saying?
need a vote, but if you wanted to
Correct.
bump it up to board review, then you would vote on
Does
that.
anybody want to do that?
No.
No, so we can move on.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll turn it back over to Ken.
Well,
Go to
you
the next
got
item.
easy.
Well, I'm all about business, mister.
All right, I'll try to be equally businesslike with design advice for new construction in the mixed-use corridor in the McLaughlin Conservation District near Fifth Street and Monroe. And I don't see the applicant here.
I don't either. So we could.
Are you it, Denise?
No, I talked to him. If you want me to tell you.
Sure. I mean,
Is that
it's up to you, Ken.
Anyway,
Go ahead.
I don't know how you pronounce his last name, John
Finkley.
Finkley. I talked to him at about 5:15 regarding some other matter, and he said that he may not make it tonight because of circumstances beyond his control. And if I didn't see him here at 7 o'clock, that would I be so kind as to tell you that? So that's what he
Okay,
said.
thank you. So I'll ask the question, Kelly, is it appropriate for us to consider this without him here since it's design
Design
advice?
advice, yeah.
How can we do that without him here?
He said
Yeah.
he was hoping
That's a
you
good
would do
question.
comments.
Oh, he was. Well, I
Well,
mean,
why don't we just
can-
We'll
reverse?
set this aside, and if he shows up, we'll bring it back to the
That's
table. How's that?
okay. And we can also briefly, if you want to, we can briefly discuss it. And then this is, you can watch the video. I can pass on comments back to him.
I
But
think in the interest of continuity of the discussion, we'll just see if he shows up
Okay.
and take it from the top.
sounds good.
Adoption of HRB policy updates.
Can I ask a question? We do have a couple that's here. Could we reverse, because the HR, our policy review might take
I will,
A little bit.
I will introduce you to these people. They are my next door neighbors,
oh,
the applicants for the
Which one's?
Tanema,
the
the stone wall, rock,
Oh, okay.
concrete wall.
okay.
Which one is that?
They're here now for their own entertainment.
Oh, okay. I
So we're already
just,
done.
Thank you.
well, I just
Go
thought,
find something
instead
better
of
to
having
do,
you
really.
sit there waiting for
Boy.
your,
Don't say get a life. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I didn't say
hey,
that.
we're here.
I think there's something better than this.
There's nothing better than this.
Oh, gosh.
Uh-oh.
I did have
Trouble now.
someone tell me, one of the grant applicants actually told me that she was going to come early
Okay.
instead of waiting until later on the agenda because she actually enjoyed these meetings.
Cool.
And she was serious.
Good for her.
Wow, we got a convert. No.
So the Historic Review Board policies, we've been going over them in work sessions for several months now and finalized our discussion of that in the April meeting and proposed the changes to the proposed guidelines, which are now submitted here in red.
Excuse me.
And did you have comments on that?
Well, I don't have any slides really, but I just pulled up the red lines. And so, thank you. We do have a public comment. So I drafted up these, the policy language based on the feedback from the board at the last meeting. There are a few items, I think especially in the fence and wall policy that you all wanted to discuss further. And so when we get to those, I can point those out. But if you'd like, I can briefly walk through these policies, the policies that are up for changes.
Okay.
Yeah?
Please.
Okay. So the second paragraph there with red lines, just a clarification, mostly for the benefit of the historic property owners, people who will be subject to these policies, so that they understand that what it means exactly, that they do not have to come to the board, that they can consult with city staff, and that anything can, if it's in question, can be brought up to the board. So policies 1 and 2 are not proposed to change. Here we go. Policy number 3 for siding. We talked about using fiber cement siding when that would be appropriate. And so the additions here clarify that fiber cement has to be reviewed by the board if it's proposed on a historically designated structure, and that it is permitted without board review on accessory buildings, on non-contributing structures in Kenema, as a replacement for vinyl siding on a designated structure, and that only smooth fiber cement boards are permitted, not the grooved ones, and that any shakes or shingles must use a straight edge rather than the staggered edge. Fences and walls is the next one. Would you like me to go do that one last, or should we just tackle it?
Can we kind of discuss it as we're going, or do you want to go through the whole?
However you like.
What's your choice?
Well,
You have,
on the repair replacement of
okay, let's go through them
the
all.
whole thing, and then come back.
Have
Okay.
a public testimony and
okay.
then their discussion.
All right.
Okay.
Sorry.
So fences and walls, we've added a paragraph that just kind of describes the purpose of fences and general purpose statement. The key sentence I think here is that fences in the front yard more open and decorative, fences in the side and rear yards more utilitarian. Clarifying some items here to be consistent with other city regulations. We removed that line because it's redundant with the new paragraph that was added at the very beginning of the policies. And then a clarification that handrails on stairs within a yard are not regulated by the fence policy. Handrails are otherwise regulated, but not by the fence policy. Okay, so I've changed the format of this and to add the descriptions and an image of each. So nothing, these are not, well, actually, let's go through it because I didn't do red lines here because it's all kind of new. So acceptable in front and side yards, wood picket, iron picket, ornamental cast iron, brick, basalt stone, combinations of iron, masonry, woven wire. We've added cast in place concrete, steel or aluminum rail, and here's one that the board was not sure about, I think, wanted to discuss further, solid wood board. So here it would be allowed in front yards only when it does not obscure the view of the home. For example, the home is higher in elevation, is raised up on the lot, higher than the fence, or when used on a non-contributing property in Kenema. So this style of fence would be permitted in those circumstances, unless the board wants to change this. Not acceptable in the front yard. We still have chain link. We've added the chain link hedge slats to just further clarify that. Post and rail and split rail continue to be not acceptable. Concrete block. We've added chicken wire, solid wood board or stockade. So this is, of course, this would be superseded by the acceptable solid wood board when it doesn't obscure the view of the home. And then we continue to have vinyl, plywood, hardboard, or asbestos panels. In alleys, rear yards, and interior side yards, acceptable fence types include anything that's acceptable in the front yard, along with concrete block, horizontal board, vertical board, stockade, wood lattice, gabion walls. And I think this is one of, that the board was wanting to discuss further, is allowing in the backyard, gabion wall, and this goat fence style. So those are in there, but we can strike them. Non-basalt stone, and then recycled concrete. And then what's not acceptable is anything that's listed as not acceptable in the front yard unless it's explicitly listed as acceptable on this list here. So this new format would completely replace the existing table. All right, HRB policy number 10 for window repair and replacement. So we have replacement, if window repair of historic wood windows is not feasible, replacement of windows is acceptable in accordance with the following. Anything listed on the National Register must be reviewed by the Historic Review Board. I would read that to include any replacement at all, right? So if we're not repairing windows, even if it's replacement with wood, it needs to be reviewed by the board. Wood, aluminum clad wood, and fiberglass clad wood windows are permitted on locally designated structures. They match the original window design. So that would mean, you know, if it's a 6/1 window like this one shown, it would have to still be a 6/1 window in appearance, where the type of window could be changed. So a casement window could be used in place of a picture window, for example, as long as the appearance is the same. If a structure was originally built with aluminum or vinyl windows, vinyl replacement windows are permitted. So that's going to be very few and far between. Fiberglass or the wood and plastic blend, which is that Fibrex material, would be permitted on new and existing accessory structures, on new and existing non-contributing structures in Kenema. Clarifying that interior window grids are not permitted. And that any replacement windows should match the dimensions of the original window styles, rails, and sill depth as closely as possible. So I think here's where, if the board wants to add anything to that, you know, we have this diagram here. If you think any of these other elements are critical to try and match as closely as possible, we can add them. And then we've got this language down here. We had some language that's just been moved. And then this sentence was just redundant with the overall policies. Are encouraged. Policy number 11 for porches and decks. This applies to new, changes to existing or new rear porches or decks. So if somebody's building a new porch on the front, it has to go to the board. If they're repairing or replacing original porch elements, there's HRB policy number 8, which requires in-kind materials and meeting the Secretary of Interior standards. And then if it's a change to an existing front porch, or if it's construction of a new rear porch or deck, it can be permitted at a staff level as long as all of these are met. And that is railings need to use vertical balusters, top and bottom rails, baluster attachment between the rails not attached to the side of the rail. Wood decks and porches need to be painted to match any color of the designated structure. Paint stain is also acceptable if it matches the designated structure. No pressure treated wood can be visible, And then composite material is allowed only for rear decks or porches, decks on the side of a structure that are not on a street corner, and for detached deck structures. Composite material color needs to also match a color on the designated structure. Aluminum rails are offered as part of these composite products. So clarifying that those rails are not permitted. And then the composite that is fully vinyl is not permitted. Or I guess it wouldn't be composite, but the alternative material that's fully vinyl would not be permitted. And then last but not least, so, policy number 12 would be brand new policy for solar technology. And these are based on that document that we've been looking at the whole time. Sloped, if panels are on a sloped roof, they can be permitted on secondary facades and on accessory structures. Panels on sloped roofs need to be low profile and installed flat. They need to be compatible in color. On flat roofs, the solar panels should be set back from the roof to minimize visibility. And solar shingles permitted on secondary facades only if they match the roof color. Freestanding are permitted in locations that minimize visibility from the public right-of-way or are screened from the public right-of-way with fencing or vegetation. So, any questions on all of that?
No questions. Okay. Paul, you want to come up and speak your mind?
Thank you, Paul Edgar, Oregon City, Kanema. I've got, there's on the page, and this is part of an overall discussion here, this on the page 9, where we get into window replacements. We talk about replacement windows on any structure listed on the National Register must be reviewed by the Historic Review Board. All of Kanema is listed on the National Register. Now, what is the interpretation of the board on contributing and non-contributing, but yet everything in Kanema within the boundary of the National Register District, it has historic places status? So that, so does that mean, therefore, in your interpretation, that every window virtually in Kanema has to be reviewed? And this is equally true as we start to take a look down through a lot of the different code and the word of contributing and non-contributing, but in the official adjudicated documentation of Kanema, the whole area, everything in it within the boundary is listed as part of the National Historic Places registered. So I'm just asking about this because it becomes critical in the wording and what we're really asking to do.
But just because there's a boundary doesn't mean everything's contributing.
Well, this is any structure, so maybe it should be any designated structure or
Any contributing structure within the district.
contributing. Yeah, put that.
Because just
extra
because
word
you have
in.
a geographical boundary doesn't mean everything's automatically part of the
Well,
district.
according to this though,
But according to
Yeah, that's my thing is,
Yeah.
there's some things that just aren't. So
yeah.
it's got to just have that worded.
But yet at the same time, everything within the boundary of Kanema by the by the Department of Interior is considered historic places.
I disagree with that. Only because you're talking geographical. There's plenty that's non-contributing, but you're saying there's a blanket over everything. And I don't agree with that.
And I think that that's something that needs to be determined. There needs to be an official determination as to what that really means.
Because I hear what you're saying. I agree. There's a border, right? There's the boundary.
Yeah.
But you can't just blanket say because of that everything's contributing.
The way that I'm reading this thing, it says any structure listed on the National Register. Any structure listed
So
on
that
the
would be a
National
designated
Register.
structure.
Right,
That
so
would,
not,
no, that would be a National Register structure such as the Elizabeth Clark.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but they're designated as opposed to every structure in.
that's right.
Yeah,
In
this,
the
this,
district.
this says nothing about
The
the district. This
District,
says
right.
only the structure.
Right,
Yeah. So that's how I read it, was,
On-
that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, it's not a blanket effect.
I mean, yeah, bullet D or item D covers, I mean, it calls out
for
new or
non-contributing.
existing non-contributing
Right.
in Kenema.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, maybe we'll revise the language on
Correct.
A just a little bit to be really clear,
Yes.
but.
But I guess you could say something to the effect of replacement windows listed, but I agree with this National Register, but you could,
But it says listed, any structure, individual structure, so,
right, or a registered district, somewhere in there it may have to say, but then you've got to pull out that not everything is contributing.
We can just add.
But for,
how about just on any
Yeah.
designated structure?
Well, if the intent, so the intent of A is that the board would review any individual property that's listed, not not a contributing property in the district. So,
Two different things.
Yeah.
there are, I think, 17 or 19 total National Register structures in the city,
That are,
all of which but one are also locally designated. So, for example, like the Ermatinger House, like you said, Elizabeth Clark House, you know, these that are listed on the National Register.
And that makes sense,
Yeah.
but there's that, but what I'm saying, I'm agreeing with him, there's the district, right?
Right.
So
There's
there's
a
that,
district.
that boundary, but within, something on here's got to be,
wording to-
the verbiage has to say something within the district that's contributing,
So
something like that.
B, the intent of B, and if this wasn't your intent, then we should change it, is that replacement windows made of wood, aluminum clad wood, and fiberglass wood are allowed on locally designated structures, and that would, if that may need to be reworded to include designated structures in McLaughlin and contributing structures in the Kenema National Register District.
Yeah,
That would clarify.
that would solve the whole thing there.
yeah.
Would you
And
agree?
it's a valid point that,
It's a step in the right direction. I just would love to have a clarification, though. Somehow, we need to come and try to clarify what does that National Register boundary designation really represent? Because it equally comes to this point on fiberboard siding. And so when we get into an area like Kenema, they say you should not be detracting from other buildings or the area or the district or the message. And if all of a sudden we come along and we have fiber siding, and all what has been designated is a type of appearance and what is detracting. And so when I look at it and say, okay, now in Kenema, we're trying to protect the whole, not just a building or somebody, we're protecting the whole district. And so within that mindset, what they say that a building should not, it's like the old comparisons say you can't put on an add-on into a historic building that detracts. So if the whole area, the whole district is a National Register district, we get into the connotation and the need for identifying what detracts against the whole.
So what I'm reading here is you would like the same standard applied to everything in the historic district.
I believe that it needs to be.
It can't.
Okay, thank you. Denise?
Can't.
Denise McGriff, McLaughlin Conservation District, and I'm here representing myself, but let me try to help you unmuddy the waters on Paul's statement. I believe that you are going to need to go back and look at the National Register nomination, because I believe when that register nomination was done, they inventoried everything. So the boundary is not merely just a geographic boundary, John. It is a requirement. So he's correct. Everything in that district requires review, whether it's contributing, because
That's right.
that's not exactly the way that it was done back in Oregon City. It wasn't done contributing, non-contributing. We know currently that there are non-contributing structures, but you have to look at the district. The periods of significance of Kenema were 1875 to 1949. You have some areas that were significant years like 1928. I just looked up the National Register nomination. It's a little small, but I think that it needs to be looked at because it's not merely a geographic boundary. The way that it is that everything in that district is subject to review because it's in the National Register district, whether or not it's a designated landmark or it's something that was built in 1932. It requires review by the board. That's why I'm saying you need to go back. Staff will need to go back and look at the nomination because I believe they inventoried everything.
Yes, but to my point is, there's plenty in Kenema that is non-contributory that was built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that you cannot put a blanket on those buildings that have nothing to do with the historic character of the district.
It's in the district. That is part of why the whole district was, it isn't like McLaughlin where we have a conservation district, some things are and some things aren't. Kenema is different. Again, it's a National Register district. They are treated differently. What I would also recommend is that Kelly check in with the State Historic Preservation Office. I would rather be absolutely sure than to make something blanket based on, that's my perception having administered the district, because I discussed that with SHPO. I said, well, what about, Oscar's house, which is not designated, but it's within the district. Yes, we had to do a staff review on some changes that he wanted to make to the house. We didn't require it to go to the board, but it got reviewed by staff. So I think you owe it to yourselves to make sure you are very clear about what the National Historic Register District means. And it means the boundary and everything in it. It's not picking and choosing. Otherwise, they would have zigzagged the boundary around it. So the best determination, as I stated, is to check in with the State Historic Preservation Office.
Sure, but I look at buildings
that would be my strong suggestion.
I look at buildings that are in that district that are.
That's not the point, John.
But
it's
it kind
the
of has an
National
issue.
Register
I
District
get
boundary.
that, and I know it has that designation, but
Yes.
at the same time, there's a lot of gray to it too.
There's-
It's not a yes or no.
No, it is.
I
It's
would
either
disagree.
in the Kenema National Register District or it is not.
Oh yes,
There's no,
but when I
there's
look
no
at a
gray.
70s fourplex, I'm
It
not
doesn't
saying.
matter.
It kind of does, but I could go
Well,
around
it
in circles.
depends on the
I know.
verbiage.
Again,
I can respond to
I would
that
check in with
too.
SHPO, just to be sure.
I sent this to SHPO, and they said they would like to review it, and that once we have the final wording, we'll send it to them. And I should have said this at the beginning,
Yeah.
but they will, if we make changes tonight, I'll send them the new version. They couldn't review it before today anyway, because they're backed up. Also, the code, chapter 1740 requires that any changes to the HRB policy be reviewed and commented on by the planning commission and the city commission. So our plan, we were planning to go to the planning commission and city commission anyway. So it actually works out perfectly because the month of June, SHPO will review it. But I'll take it to planning commission, get their comments, take it to city commission, get their comments. And if we get any comments from any three of those bodies, then I can bring those back in our June meeting.
So Denise, that would solve all of that.
Oh, absolutely, that's why I said, talk to SHPO.
And so it goes to
They-
SHPO before it goes to the planning.
I
Well,
would-
it's gonna kind of go to them at the same
I
time.
would definitely
and
go
I'll
to
gather all
SHPO
the
before,
comments.
because
That's what I was going to
Planning
say, is
commission
I would have it go.
this is not their thing, and I can tell you, other than Rocky and maybe myself, there's not anybody on the city commission that's going to understand all of this
So
specificity.
So Kelly, what we have here, you're gonna send to them so they can look at it, and then
With any changes we do tonight.
Yes.
or in any comments they would have to it.
And if SHPO has any comments, and if Planning Commission, City Commission have any comments, then I'll compile all those, bring them back to you in June, and we can make any changes that we want to make based on those comments.
Got it.
And then what's
Hopefully adopt it.
desired by the City Commission is that the City Commission then adopts the HRB policies by resolution in July, and then we'll be absolutely done.
That's what we did when we adopted them.
Yeah.
We made changes to them before it went through the same process.
Yeah. So if there's an issue with the National Register District, I think we'll hear from SHPO. Also, I think the policies as written actually do account for the difference between the Conservation District and the National Register District, because clearly any non-contributing structures in McLaughlin aren't regulated by the policies at all. So those properties can do really, they're not restricted whatsoever. The non-contributing structures in Kenema will still be, subject to these policies. So they do have to use the fiberglass windows. They can't install vinyl windows. So there are restrictions, but these policies do give a bit more flexibility to those structures in Kenema that are not contributing.
Can
Got
you
it.
go back to the top of your PowerPoint there?
Very beginning?
Very beginning, please. So the one thing that is not clear, and I take a more restrictive opinion, is that you should say somewhere in here that it is strongly recommended or potential applicants should or shall review what they're proposing to do with staff. That was always something that I tell people. I said, even if it meets these things, check in with staff and make sure that what you are doing follows these guidelines, because nobody wants to be the person who says, well, I followed the guidelines, and then code compliance comes out and sees you and you're not. And so somewhere in there, even though you're saying that these are,
I thought it said something.
does it
like
say, I mean,
that in there.
I'm just repeating this because I think it's really important that it be in, 14 point bold. Please check in with staff while you are using these.
What it says here, city staff are available to help property owners determine if their projects meet HRB policies.
Well, I'd make it
So
stronger.
maybe show
Make it
city
stronger.
staff, you shall,
Yes, that would be, I mean, whatever you want to do to make it stronger, you can weasel word it, but just make it clear so that it's just so unfortunate when people go off and then you're here having to deal with an after the fact thing. And it could have just been prevented if they would just, read and say, okay, yeah, I do need to check, and make
That's the
sure.
problem,
at
is
least-
people don't.
I know, and that's what I'm saying is that.
Do you have anything else?
Oh, yes, keep going. I have a couple of concerns about the siding using the fiber cement. You don't say anything in there about the profile. Fiber cement has certain dimensions and certain profiles.
It says matches the original siding and profile and design.
Okay, so make sure that's really clear, because I probably missed it the first time.
Well,
It's clear.
Yeah.
You
so
can't,
this is, if the fiber cement is not, the policies wouldn't allow it on the designated structure
Right, the
itself.
primary structure.
Yes, and so it says that on the primary structure, it goes for board review, and the board's decision would be based on how well the substitute material matches the original siding and profile and design. But if the profile and design is important for all other cases as well, then we can
Yeah, I mean,
revise
I,
that.
my personal and professional opinion is that fiber cement has no business being on any designated structure. I don't care if you match the profile, it's not the same. And if I had to replace siding on my own personal house, yes,
Moving along.
I've got a list, so I apologize. But
Well,
this is a
okay,
very,
I'm going to tell you something,
this
Denise,
is,
right
yes.
now.
How much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Okay, because I'm also representing myself and the neighborhood association, so I will speed it
Then
up
you
to the
have
next
5
one.
minutes,
So
and you've already taken
on your,
more than that.
well, I was talking about the Kenema National Register District, which was information for
Okay.
you guys based on my
Just
professional knowledge.
understand,
I understand,
can't let
Ken.
one person dominate the whole discussion.
I am not trying to do that. So I wanted to be very clear about the fences. You talk about the rear. Are you also talking about corner side yards?
Corner side yards are included with
For the
front
stuff
yard.
yard.
that's not,
It's in here.
It's front yard.
yes, the ones that you're allowing in the rear or the side yard.
So the corner side yard is treated the same as the front yard, but the corner side yard ends as soon
Yes.
as the back of the house ends, and then it becomes rear yard. So there still could be rear yard fences on.
Well, yeah, that's my concern because you have some properties in McLaughlin that have a corner side yard and it's clear that you can see the profile of the house from that street and from the front, whatever's considered the front. So there may be some conflict there about where those types of fences go. And I'm just looking at the unintended consequences. I think your statement needs to be clear about handrails are not part of the fence policy, but you should asterisk where they need to go for that. Because otherwise, I'd say some person, if I didn't know any better, say, oh, I don't have to have my handrails on my porch reviewed because here's the fence policy. It's not saying that I don't. It's just saying it's not a part of this, but where do they go to make sure that their handrails or whatever are appropriate for whatever they're doing? I'm just saying, it's clarifying. I have a question about your cast in place concrete. So if it's like a retaining wall or something like that, you're not talking about a wall. So an example, adjacent to my driveway where they put in the new water line, I have a very small footing wall that it's not adjacent to my house, but it's adjacent to my driveway, but it's about that tall. The one you used, the example was a little taller. You're considering a certain height of wall, or where's the wall? I mean, is it that this height's a wall, or if it's this height's a wall? Because again, mine is a footing.
Well, yours is like a curb.
Yeah, it is like a curb.
Yeah.
It's holding up the side of the hill where I had to take all my landscape boulders from my yard and put them there so it hold up the side of my property from sloughing down to the driveway. So that was just a question. And then I think you have as an example wood lattice, and traditionally in any historic district, it was not crisscross lattice. It's always square lattice. And I don't know if you want to clarify that or not, because I don't think the crisscross lattice, unless you're using it as a climbing vine thing, is appropriate for a fence in anybody's district. And then my other question was about your timber tech. And the reason I asked that, I was just at a designated structure in the McLaughlin district, and they use timber tech on their porch decking. You can't see it from the street, but I noticed it when I walked on it, and I looked at it and I said, I mean, it's obvious that it's timber tech because you can tell by the surface of the material. Are you looking at that in terms of dimension? Or, because example, my house, I have wide porch boards. I probably would never use timber tech because my porch is covered, it's under a cover, and I didn't have to ever replace it. But let's say I did. I don't think I would use any timber tech because I don't know dimensionally it would fit what's already there. And I know when we replaced the porch on the Holmes house, which is a National Register property, we were able to get dimensional lumber to replace the porch decking exactly the way it was when the stuff we took off.
I think we talk about that. It says it's just on the rear porch, correct?
Yeah, it's not allowed on.
Right.
It's not allowed on the front. It says it in here.
Again, just a concern because there are certain opinions. I happen to think that the rear of a property, a designated property, is just as important as the front. Whether you can see it from the street or not, it all falls into the same category. If they're building a detached deck, yeah, I personally or professionally wouldn't care if they use timber tech, but if it's part of the existing structure and they're replacing a deck, the front, the sides, everything of the designated building is important, not just the front, the part that you can see from the street. So it's just something that I'd like you to think about and consider because the rear is important. There are significant things that happen on the rear of houses. Let's say somebody adds on additions, that tells how the house evolved over time. There's still a story to be told by that. Other than that, I thought you guys did a great job. I will tell you professionally, I don't agree with everything, but I see where you're going with trying to compromise, and I appreciate the fact that you took a lot of my comments about the unacceptable ones, because it's just, some of those just don't work. And I'm glad that you guys really looked at those long and hard, because, goat fencing, really, folks, but, just
Okay.
trying to protect my own professional and personal investment in McLaughlin District and in Oregon City.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate it. Thank you, board.
Well, I want to make a suggestion for future hearings, future HRB proceedings. We're always under a time bind. If you have what you know to be a large volume of material to cover, please put it in writing and submit it in written form, because we do have the time limits that we try to apply to all public testimony. And lately, I've allowed that to go way beyond what those limits are. And as a result, we tend to go home in the dark. So in the future, I'd ask that you submit your long testimony in writing, please.
Good idea.
All right, discussion here. And where shall we start? Beginning seems like a good spot.
I think so.
Shall we take it section at a time here? We're looking at the red printed type.
Okay. And I like that you've changed it from guidelines to policies. I think that gives it a little bit more
Yeah, that's good.
structure.
Yeah, definitive.
Change it from a should to a shall. Kind of, sort of.
Shall has legal meaning though, kind of. I mean, they're not absolutely required. They can proceed
No,
through
but it kind of gives, it's kind of like goes from a should to a shall in a way.
Or should we just go to a should? Is there anything, there's no should in there right now, right?
It just offers city staffs assistance. We could say property owners are strongly encouraged to seek the advice of city staff. You can beef up that wording if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And you could even add a little warning or something that says that, projects that are completed without staff or board approval are at risk of, that if they're
Code
found.
enforcement.
Yeah, if they're later found not compliant, they have to be removed or something like that, so that it's really clear what they're risking.
Anyone else have an observation on that? You're writing it? Yeah, okay. Moving down to policy number 3, regarding siding. Comments? I think in particular comments regarding the fiber cement, because we've had public testimony regarding that.
When I look at that and I see how fiber cement's desired as a replacement, if someone wants to come in and replace it on their building, it's got to come before the board. Doesn't mean it's going to get approved. It just has to be dealt with, and most likely it.
And I'd like to see either having it bolded or underlined, board must review the proposal so that it does,
Or keep it in red.
Or keep it, or something to kind of,
Like the
you know,
POW.
make it, yeah, make it stand out so that they can't say, oh, I didn't see that, or, you know. Just have a
That
little
whole
bit more
sentence could-
emphasis.
That whole sentence could be either bolded or kept in a different color.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was gonna be my comment when we first started, because it's just, it might get lost in the whole
And it
text of the
doesn't,
thing.
there's nothing there that implies that it's going
It's
to,
going to be approved.
yeah, that's my point, is it's
Right.
here. To the earlier public comments.
Well, then, just going back up to the comment number one, or policy number one, would you do the same thing for the strongly encourage to review with staff?
Put an emphasis on that.
Yeah. Bold, underline, different color.
I can see, you know. And
And
where,
now, as far as I know, the city does not use color, so we're gonna, if we're gonna use type to emphasize
Bold?
things, we're gonna,
bold it.
You can do
Yeah.
bold or underline or both.
Under, yeah,
Italic. That's italic.
italic. No, that kind of sometimes gets lost.
The
Just so I could
last
control B
sentence
when
there
I-
implies that the board may be willing to approve fiber cement siding in some circumstances. So if you don't think that's likely, then that sentence might be a little bit misleading but if you want to, it might gives people hope that they might be able to do that.
well, I think that those statements are all pretty 100% true, with the possible exception of item B, pursuant to the discussion that we just had on that. I don't know if we would move item B to a different area.
I mean, on non-contributing, is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about the statement here that says fiber cement siding is permitted without board review under the following circumstances. A, C, D, and E, I think are appropriate. B is up for discussion.
Because in the Kenema district, would it then, from what our discussion is, would it have to come, if it is non-contributing? It would not have to come before the review board?
That's what it says here.
If
Yeah,
you're replacing siding on a non-contributing structure that's not wood, then yeah, I think it would not have to come to the board under that reading.
Unless it's vinyl or something that's not.
right,
yeah.
right. That's
fiber
the
cement.
disclaimer there. So if a non-contributing structure had wood siding, they would not have to come if they're non-contributing, then
It
for
would have to
that,
come.
they would have to come.
If they're not.
If it has wood right now, it always has to come. I think.
Okay,
Well, but what this,
but
I
that's,
think what this says is if there's wood siding on a non-contributing structure, so, and I think the dates that in my head, the period, the significant period is 1850 to 1928. So, say
That
there's a
would all be wood.
1952 structure, they come in and they have wood siding and they want to replace with fiber cement. Because they're non-contributing, which probably, the inventory form says if it's contributing or not contributing, out of period, would be allowed to do fiber cement without board review.
Should you specify out of period,
On non-contributing out of
as you
period
just
structures.
stated it, non-contributing out of period?
Most of the time, they're one and the same.
But you'd have to specify the period, right? If you're gonna say the period, you've gotta say the dates.
Sure.
Yes, and there are two versions of the inventory, and one of the versions has it listed as out of, like, it'll say what the status of the structure is. It'll say out of period,
Oh.
and it'll say non-contributing.
Because it's not within that time parameter.
Yeah, it'll
right?
say why it's non-contributing, like it's been significantly altered or it's out of period.
But if you're going from wood to fiber, what is it called? Concrete. Fiber cement, excuse me. That almost makes it become even more non-contributing if that's I mean, it takes it down further.
Oh, it
Do you know what
depends.
I mean?
What do you mean?
I've seen some really bad wood
Siding
sites.
too.
That's not, the newer non-contributing structures we've approved with fiber cement are more compatible with the district than some of the structures in those weird periods that might have vertical wood siding or some weird other stuff that's not very compatible with the district.
But it's non-compatible with the district, but it's still the original style of that house. So then do you take a house that was designed with, I'm not just using your example, that has vertical siding and then you put in non-wood horizontal siding? Is that an improvement or does it matter, which I think it would in the Kenema district? Do you get what I'm saying? And that's probably a worst case scenario, but
You're talking like if it had a vertical channel lock siding, that you want to then put a horizontal fiber
Yeah.
cement siding on it, but it's a non-contributing building. That's what you're saying.
right, but it changes if that was the original siding on the house, because a lot of that was done like in the,
In the 60s and 70s.
yeah, but
And
we are starting to designate, I mean, not in that district, but,
yeah.
just throwing it open for discussion, because I think, I don't know if there's a way to phrase it, or, I don't know. Or am I just splitting hairs?
Horse hairs. Can I ask a silly question? Are we talking about all of this just to amend or add comments tonight? Is that what this is?
I would be redlining, or I would be amending this version before it goes to Planning Commission, City Commission, SHPO.
So we're just trying to, whatever's been redlined and read, just to make a couple comments here or there, just finishing touches, I guess. Okay. But it's not we're not voting on anything, we're just double checking. Is that right?
Well, it is a public hearing. I suppose you should probably vote on this to,
This isn't a public hearing.
it's not a quasi judicial hearing, but it is a public hearing. I mean, Chapter 1740 requires that the board have a public hearing to make changes to the policies. So I would think we should vote to send this for comment.
Got you. I was just asking where we were going with it, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody make a suggestion on what we want to do with it.
Like you're asking,
Well,
yes.
if you ask me, I think that the staff, gosh darn it, exercises judgments of this kind on a routine basis over the counter. And what we're doing here is trying to provide staff with the guidelines to work with. So when Mr. Homeowner with his 1970s split entry home, which seems to be the dominant architectural form numerically in Kenema, and wants to put fiber cement siding on it, do we want the staff to refer that to us? I think that's the question that this comes down to.
My comment would be no.
Or do we leave it up
I
to
would
staff?
lean that direction. Well, that's what John is saying.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's a staff thing. For sure.
Grant?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I mean,
Okay, so that is the way we will leave that and move on to the next one, which
And I think it's better to discuss that type of thing.
Yes,
Here, you know,
yes.
beforehand. so
make sure that
go
we
in-
understand what
Exactly.
we're up to anyway, if nobody else does. Fences and walls.
I see no issues with that.
Anything in there wave a red flag at you?
No.
The only thing that I don't care for is the Gabion
Gabion wall?
Gabion wall.
That is not,
I mean, it's in the rear side, I know,
Yeah.
but
it
it's
is not
just,
acceptable.
huh?
Where's
It's-
Gabion?
It's on the page 7.
Top of page
It's
7.
as-
It-
it's listed
It doesn't
under-
look like a gabion there, but it is.
This one.
You have to.
That is,
That just
There.
goes
Yeah.
against everything that I hold to say. I mean, it just, you know, it looks like it should be out in the middle of a field.
well, Gabion walls are actually retaining walls. They're a structural
Yeah.
wall that can take the place of concrete. So they're, in some ways, they're decorative, but they're primarily structural.
yeah,
Yes.
I don't see them as worse than concrete, manufactured concrete block really. They're both
I
kind
think
of,
the other part of it is whatever that rock that goes in there is a choice. It could either be small stone, it could be rock like this, but it all depends on what goes into that. But they're baskets is what they are. They're a basket that opens up and you fill it, but it is a structural thing. And so it solves a lot of problems in a non-concrete way, I guess. And what the other benefit of Gabion walls are, they percolate, they filter.
Right.
So there's benefits to it, but to your comment, is it good in the backyard? I can't say. If somebody has a sloped backyard and they want to try and retain it, is it acceptable with boulders or is a Gabion wall okay? You know, it's
Yeah.
something like that. I'd take that, kind of like what Grant said, I'd take that over a concrete wall or cement block, for sure.
As a structural thing, there is a height limit on retaining walls.
4 feet before it has
Yeah.
to be engineered.
Yeah. So what we're seeing in the picture is about that, about the limit.
Yeah, it's kind of pushing it right there. You can't really go beyond that, although you can step them back, terrace them. But again, when you get up to a certain height, it has to be engineered. So that's just a comment on what that is.
Okay.
I don't have any comment on, oh yeah, that's cool or not. It's just, that's what they are.
It's just,
It's like solving a structural problem in a kind of a aesthetic way. I
Pokey way?
guess. No, they're
They
actually
are?
very strong.
they are.
Very
Okay.
strong
Huh.
and practical,
Yeah.
I,
but we don't deal with practicalities, we deal with aesthetics.
Aesthetics,
Yeah.
right.
So I don't think it's a bad thing.
To me, it reminds me more of a rule setting as opposed to being in us.
Well, some of it used to be rural. Well, then-
Yeah, and that's what, you know, I kind of think,
You know what it is? It's a modern version of what you see on the English countryside of walls that retain for borders and stuff,
Right.
right?
yeah.
Hedgerows.
And
Yes,
hedgerows, yes.
That's
Yeah.
what they're called.
And then the only other thing, I'll throw it out and then I'll shut up, is, I agree with Denise. When I was on the Historic Review Board before, we just didn't allow the diagonal. It was the,
Square
which was
lattice
the
is okay.
square, yeah. So,
I think,
I would like to see the diagonal.
where was that?
It's on page 6 at the bottom.
That is, I would You're saying keep that as square lattice.
Yes.
Yeah,
not
I would
diagonal.
agree. Diagonal, I would cross out diagonal. Make that vertical or horizontal.
Because that's much more of a modern form of the
Yeah, because
lattice.
if you cross out diagonal, then you can say vertical, horizontal patterned wood, which is basically a square
Yeah.
lattice. Would anybody disagree with that?
Nope.
So you cross out diagonal.
See, I got at least one out
And
of
take a
three.
new picture.
Actually,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say, the square lattice is about 120 bucks a pop, but it's a very thick.
And it's a lot thicker than
Oh yeah,
this
it's
stuff.
about an inch and a quarter or so thick from, you know.
Yeah, and plus, in most cases, I think it's wood.
Oh, it's cedar, but
Because
it's
now you can get it, you can also get that diagonal stuff in,
and PVC.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it would have to be a wood, and it says it here.
And it says wood panels,
Yeah.
which is good, but
I
anyway.
didn't see anything else, but those are good comments.
So, the solid wood board, under the definition, says may be topped with lattice or other wood designs. Do you want to specify that?
It's got to be, it would have to be square. Yeah,
Okay.
you have
Yes.
to keep it consistent throughout.
A square lattice, yeah.
They're gonna say, that's really expensive. Well, pay to play.
I mean, the same thing for the horizontal board.
The what?
Description too.
Yeah, because they,
Right about that one.
right, yeah, the,
So
with the
wherever we have the word
Horizontal
lattice,
and
add
solid.
square.
so
Yeah.
anywhere it's lattice,
Yeah.
yeah, just add square.
All right.
All right. For clarity's, where did we end up on Gabion Wall? Did-
I think it's fine in the back for me, but that's me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like it, but in the back, I guess, if we're gonna allow the other types that we do, it doesn't. It's no worse than concrete block if we're gonna allow that.
And I'm guessing most of the time if that comes into play, it's gonna be on a sloped lot where you can't really see it in any shape or form.
Okay,
I still stand with what I said.
the windows,
I'm just one.
we are windows.
I didn't see it.
And between A, B, and D, what can we do to make that clearer and
I don't know how to word that.
I think we talked about for A, we would say replacement of any windows on any structure listed individually on the National Register.
Oh,
Like, add the word individually to A.
you know what would help would be to put that part of the sentence first. For national,
Okay.
for,
individually
Individually listed
listed national
structures on
registers, yeah.
yeah.
That's,
And do that with any other categories of structures that we're talking about.
So then B is not just locally designated structures, but it's locally designated or contributing in Kenema. As it meant.
Yes.
My one
Is
comment,
the, oh, go ahead.
well, two comments.
I was just going to ask if the definition of locally designated is written down somewhere. Is there documentation of what we mean by locally designated historic structures?
Yes, but I think that it's better to be explicit in the way that Grant just said, because our database, if you search your property on our mapping system, for example, if any property in Kenema will come out as designated, as a trigger for people to say, oh, I'm in the National Register District,
Sure.
I need to, ask staff what that means. And so, yes, I think we should be explicit instead of just leaving it as locally designated.
Okay, good.
What I was gonna say, so my comment on B while we're on B is that on a contributing structure or a designated structure in Laughlin as well, changing the window type oftentimes would not be appropriate. So, a casement, like in the example here, a casement window would be appropriate on a bungalow, but would not really be appropriate on a vernacular contributing house in Kenema to replace a double hung with a casement window or something. You know, it's not appropriate to that style. And that's a pretty significant part of what a craftsman bungalow style is
Style looks
versus
like,
a,
right.
you know, is use of casement windows, that sort of thing. So I'm kind of inclined that that should not be allowed, that changing the type of window would have to,
Come before us.
if it was on a designated structure.
There are times when building codes require egress, and, you know, and so you need to use a different type of window to meet egress requirements, but, so if we scratch that, then those cases would come to the board, and that might be okay.
Did everybody read the written materials submitted by Brett Kemp? This letter?
I read everything, but I'm not, I don't remember who it was that submitted it. Is there something
Do
in
you
there
have
that's
that on?
pertinent?
I don't remember seeing this.
I can pull it up. It's one of the public comments.
Public comments.
There are
Yeah.
3 public comments attached.
And while she's looking at, wait.
So this is actually submitted
Yeah,
by
that's the
a
one.
McLaughlin resident, who spoke with Kemp and
Right.
relayed the
Who Kemp
information in the
was,
letter.
And there was another public comment submitted in writing as well from Mr. Edgar, and that was the National Register nomination for Kenema. More of an FYI.
Yeah, this one was, these comments
Read that.
were with the original, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they can.
Well, after requesting people to submit input in writing, I want to make sure that we pay full attention to it when we get it. So any observations about Mr. Kemp's comments?
Well, he, like me, likes Milgard Essence windows. Use them at the beach.
And how does that relate then to the windows discussed here on page 9? No comments?
I'm trying to get. What page did you say? 9?
That's this page.
Yeah, go back. I was reading comments. If I didn't have any problems.
Yeah. Item D, new and existing non-contributing structures in Kenema. The issue was raised, but I don't have any problem at all with fiberglass, wood, plastic blended materials on new and existing non-contributing structures in Kenema.
Does it need to have anything that says the conservation district? Could someone make the argument that, hey, you're only addressing Kenema, not McLaughlin? Should that be added to this, or no?
Well,
I mean,
they would already be under B or they'd be not in this policy at all, right?
right.
yes. Okay.
Well, I think what we're gonna do is reword B to say, look, designated structures in McLaughlin Conservation District and contributing structures in Kenema.
Yeah, that would cover everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think we've got the windows.
Yeah, figured out.
Porches and decks. I like the way letters A, B, and C were not modified.
I don't know why Word document formatting is odd.
I know.
I don't see anything.
My only comment here would be kind of with Denise's comments that some historic structures may have rear porches or decks that are kind of architectural versus just a deck off the back. And I don't know how to, if it was significant part of the architecture of the home.
It should be replaced in kind.
Right.
I would agree with that. If it's something that's significant to the house and was contributory to the house, like a covered porch that was there or something that was part of
Right.
the house that.
Right. If it's just a deck off
Deck
the
on
back,
the
that's
back.
not really.
It's probably been added on over the
Right.
years.
Like a
anyway.
traditional deck that you would see,
Yeah.
that I can see as being something separate that you could apply that to. So your comment would be is if it's a contributing house, the rear deck should be
If a
reviewed.
contributing
back
design
door.
element to the house or something like that.
Yeah, I'm struggling
that's
with how
kinda-
to say it because it's.
But that's a happy medium though, right?
Yeah.
Something that's contributed, to address a rear, because it would be more of a rear porch as
Likely,
opposed to
yeah.
a rear deck on a historic.
So does the
House.
first sentence cover that if we say repair or replacement of original
Porch.
porch or
Maybe
deck?
just
Okay,
porch or
okay, yeah, I
deck,
think
yeah.
that,
instead
I
of
guess
front.
that does,
Oh,
okay,
so
so the first
number
sentence, original porch, yeah, okay.
And put a differentiation
But it
in
says new
between
front
porch
porches.
and deck.
So,
Okay.
because there could be original rear decks, right?
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Decks
So-
are-
They'd be very rare. Most of it would be a
Yeah.
covered porch with a
Porch.
door or something, but there could be that rare case, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
can't
we're gonna
really
add decks to that
of-
sentence, so then that covers any,
Yeah,
It's usually
Any
anything added
existing
onto the back is
original.
usually a deck, that,
right.
as opposed to.
But that's what I'm saying, some have, and most likely weren't an original, but something that may have been added on in that
Historic
period of time.
Right.
Yeah, like some sort of a covered porch that's usually sagging, and drooping. Because it's like, hey, let's put a washer and dryer in the back in the 30s or whatever they
Yeah.
put on it, something, yeah.
so do you wanna clarify, we're talking only about original, because many times it's difficult to say if this was original or not. Do we
Most of the
wanna
time, they're
just
not.
say-
They're not,
Do we wanna just say then, repair or replacement of historic porches and deck?
Yes, that
Okay.
would be good.
Historic is a good word.
yeah.
Yeah, that solves all that.
And if they say, well, we can just say that it was built within the
That
historic period, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It'd be pretty easy to tell.
And then under D, we can clarify composite material is allowed only for non-historic or new.
Yes. Because that follows with what Denise was commenting on, that
Yeah,
there are cases where it would not be appropriate
okay.
in sort of her comment. She was saying all of it, but
Yeah.
didn't see anything else.
Solar was good with me.
I thought so too.
Okay.
Yeah, the solar looks,
Solar?
I like the
Solar
no, I said the
roofs,
solar looks,
shingles.
I think that looks good.
Freestanding's kind of a, yeah,
One other, in our discussion here, one other thing, we keep referring to the designated structures within Kenema. Is there a way to include a sentence or a phrase or something that, as they're going into it, that if you have any doubt as to whether or not, in the Kenema district, if there is a, contact the city staff to make sure, because some people, you can read some of this, and if you're not wanting to comply, I could see them looking at, just to see is there a way to phrase that?
Hard part is getting somebody to see this. I think most people are gonna plow ahead.
Well, I'll say this now, I was gonna save it for communications, but, with our CLG grant funding, we are hiring a summer intern who's starting June 24th and would be working on updating our website and creating brochures and materials to get the new HRV policies out to the public.
An intern.
An intern.
Oh, I thought, yeah, because I didn't know if you said interns.
No,
One.
one intern who's going to, produce these materials for us and update our website. And so maybe
An
one
education.
thing, maybe one thing that could be included in that is providing links to that, list of, making it easily accessible to find out whether your property is contributing or non-contributing. And so maybe it doesn't have to be written in the policies, but it can just be information that's paired with it on our website so that it's easy to find.
But in here, something, if you live within the Kenema neighborhood, please contact the city staff as to whether or not, these policies pertain to you. I don't know, that would, because within the conservation district, we talk about the designated structures, but
Yeah, I think in a lot of the outreach materials, I had a sentence about which structures, who this applies to, and so I can take that sentence and fold it in here.
Okay, I think a simple motion to pass along the edited version could be voted on and forward.
so moved.
Well said.
So-
You did it very well.
I guess I would make a motion to approve PC 19-046, adoption of HRV policy updates with the various amended comments
Peace, where do you,
right here. Right?
Yeah.
Does that sound
the
right?
HRV
Second.
policy updates?
Second.
Number-
Okay? Start with Board Member Stobie,
Aye.
Board Member Met,
Aye.
Board Member McLaughlin.
Aye.
Board Member Blythe,
Aye.
Chair Basing.
Aye.
Which of these ladies is for the
Okay.
grant? That,
We'll move forward. The next item on the agenda is preservation grant. And I
They're
see
not here.
for whoever they are.
Let's do,
we have
there's-
some folks here.
Who are they for? Which one?
Well, Denise is representing the item number 6, the first grant, and
Okay.
then the other folks are,
Give the other
Oh.
folks. Let the other folks. Which one? That would, number 7?
PG 1901 is, Denise is representing the grant applicant.
Hippie.
Okay, let's take it in order. And staff report, if there is one on it.
I can't.
Okay. So before I dive into the grant request, I just want to give you a little update on our
$1,800.
preservation grant program financing. So we have a 2-year budget cycle now. So we have 5,000 per year, 10,000 total. So these are all the grants we've awarded. The blue lines here are the ones that are before you today. we have already awarded these grants over here. This one for 803 Fifth Avenue that we're hearing tonight is actually, the work hasn't been done yet. They're requesting additional funds, so they're twice on the list. So they requested 1,000, they're requesting another bit of money, and then we would still have money left after that. We don't have any grant applications, to request that funding. So the $1,800 would be left on the table if we approve this grant tonight.
But if we approve the other one, then there's $800 left.
Well, see, the other one, the work I don't think would be done
Get it done.
before the end of the
Oh.
fiscal year.
Gotcha.
So they're gonna have to be the first grant that is awarded for the next budget cycle. So if you approved it tonight, then we wouldn't actually authorize
Till that
anything
funding
until July 1.
Gotcha.
So that's just a summary of kind of where we are. We got almost all the money out, but not quite.
So we have 10,000 altogether, is that what?
Every
years.
every
Each-
two
every 2
years,
years, okay.
10,000. Oh, sorry about that. So the first grant request we have, this would be the one that would fall under next year's budget cycle. It's for 415 Jefferson Street in McLaughlin Conservation District. That's a photo of the front of the home. What they're requesting is a grant, a total of $1,000, a portion of which would be to replace one of the existing wood windows that has rotted. And then the remainder would be to fund aluminum storm windows. And the storm windows would be the enameled aluminum, and they're choosing that forest green color that you see on the color options. I attached the product brochure so that you could see what everything looked like to the agenda. So the storm windows are proposed on all of the windows on the house, and the applicant plans to apply for a second grant next budget cycle to go towards the storm windows as well if this grant request is successful. So the total cost of the storm windows is about $12,000. So they're looking to do it in 2 phases. So I didn't include every single photo that they include. Oh, and the one on the left there, the boarded up window, that's the one they'd be replacing. Here's the rotted wood. And they submitted a letter, so there are 2 bids for the window replacement. One of the companies that submitted a bid also included a letter that, described the window that is not really repairable, beyond repair. So let's see. Are there any, well, I think the applicant might want to.
I didn't see, what was the brand of the aluminum window? Was there a brand?
What is it?
Because I saw the brochure, but
Truax.
Trumax.
Truax is
Truax,
the company, and it's.
Yeah, they're in Portland.
Anyway, good evening. I'm here representing Mike and Connie Jarrett, who live at 415 Jefferson Street. I'm Denise McGriff, and they are out of state, and I hope not coming back through Oklahoma and Missouri right now because they were driving. And Mike sent in, gave me a letter of authorization to speak on his behalf. I've been assisting him with this particular project over, to be honest with you, last 2 years. The McCowan House, as you know, is one of the McLaughlin Conservation District's very significant buildings and is one of our earliest properties. Mike has been what I would call a true craftsman and has done most of the repairs on the house that have been needed because wasn't this Jane Brewer's house? Yes, Jane Brewer, those of you that know the history, used to live in this house. And they did some interesting alterations, but Mike has returned them to their glory, and he actually has done some window repair himself, but this one he really feels is way beyond his capacity. And I don't know if you're all familiar with Dale Farley, who used to have a business here in Oregon City's Wooddale Windows. He has done a number of buildings here in Oregon City. We did also get a bid from Chosen Wood Windows, but Ryan has been so busy, he's not been able to call me back to tell me that the window can't be repaired, but I've sent in several requests. But anyway, Mike would like to use Wooddale. The reason that he is requesting painted or baked on enamel aluminum windows is because the south side of his house, which basically, as you saw, that elevation has no overhang and it takes the brunt of all the weather. And this window was literally on the verge of falling out, and that's why he took it out before it ended up being more damaged than it is. So he is requesting that he be allowed to use aluminum. He's concerned that the wood would not be as durable and he'd be in the same fix maybe in another 10 or 20 years when it deteriorates on that south elevation. But I did go with him to view the sample product, and the forest green color is the one he's chosen that would match the trim that he already has on his house. And I thought it was pretty good. We went to several other companies to look at their wood storm windows. We probably went to 5 or 6, and Mike just wasn't satisfied with the quality of what he was going to get. And I was, he's very picky. And I found a couple, I thought, well, this might work. And he
What's
just,
your comment on
aluminum storms? I think as long as they are painted to match the trim on the house, you don't really notice them. I will tell you that I have them on my house, but my storm windows were put on my house in probably 1980, long before I purchased it, and they were painted to enameled to match the trim.
You can't tell from the street, really.
No, and if you go by my house, I repainted them to match the new trim on my house, and you can't really tell. And my house isn't as old as Mike's, but I can tell you when I repainted my house 3 years ago, I took one of the storms off to see if I had to repaint the inside windows. I didn't have to do anything to the windows at all. It has really protected them. My east side is my bad side, and that's where I get the most sun and damage. It's holding up pretty darn well. And I think as long as they are enamel painted, so he would appreciate the request as recommended by staff.
As a preservation grant, we're looking at these storm windows as a means of protecting, preserving the
Original,
historic
yes.
windows.
And that's really Mike's goal. The one thing I also wanted to point out to you, I don't know if you notice on the front elevation, he is one of the few houses in Oregon City that actually has real shutters that actually function with shutter dogs, the little latches that hold the storm window in place. Now, why they put them on the McCowan house, but I think it has something to do with where they were from originally. We've never gotten a storm to where he's actually had to close, but they do still work.
It's to keep the zombies out.
I think you're right. When the apocalypse happens, he'll be ready to roll.
They're safe.
But we don't have, I think I can only think of one other house that,
The Ainsworth house.
yes, Ainsworth's house. And the rest of the ones, you shutters you see in Oregon City, they are totally
Decorative.
fake, not appropriate.
My question would be on the forest green is probably going to be a lot brighter than what he has.
He's
He's
specifically,
Yeah,
I bet it'd
Yeah.
be darker.
So is he going to repaint the trim on his window to match? So that
he
it's-
has asked them to match the color of his trim, and he's taken in a sample of the paint.
So they don't just go with what the stock color is? They'll
He was
they'll
not,
match
he
it?
was very specific with them about that.
And it's a matte finish?
Yes, it's not shiny.
Shiny,
It's probably like
okay.
a satin, I bet.
Yeah, it's more like a
Right,
satin, so
right.
if he had to clean it off, it would come off without
Right.
taking,
Right.
it's not
Right.
flat.
I would just, that would be my, I can't believe we're approving
Yeah, but
aluminum storm windows after what we've.
Well, I think
been
that-
going
and
I know,
through.
but
and
the
that's what
comment that came out.
And that's what I told Mike, is exactly what Ken
Well,
said,
Yeah.
is that
Preserving the historic
it's,
window.
Exactly.
he's preserving, this is.
Exactly, but I mean, after what we've just gone through, and here we're,
If he was totally replacing with aluminum windows, I wouldn't even be here. We
That's
wouldn't even be having this discussion.
But as long as as long as they are able to match, otherwise he might have to
I know, he wasn't thrilled with that prospect, I assure you.
right, but I mean, just so that he knows that it should,
Well, it's not like he's already gone through the process, so he knows.
okay.
He's given him a sample to match it, so.
Well, you'd have to live with all of us.
I know, and I will definitely relay that to him, and we're probably going to be
The
going
report
back to
says it's
Truax
not
just to
allowed.
double check on everything, to make sure that everything is as it is, as he's specified, because I've called a couple of times just to say, okay, now this is what we agreed to, this is what the contract says, and he doesn't have any issue with with it going into next year's, because Dale still has to make the window, and,
Yeah, you should probably have that done before you
yeah,
go.
and he's got to have that done first, and it's just going to take time because Dale is very exacting, so. And in fact, John,
Any
weren't you on the
other
board when they
questions for
approved
the
my door?
applicant?
My front
Yeah,
door
oh,
that
yeah.
Dale made, yeah, people can't tell that it's a new door.
That was a long time ago. Do you want to say
So anyway,
anything?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. In staff's recommendation for approval, I'm assuming that you carefully evaluated the code in regard to aluminum frame storm windows.
So the HRV policies allow aluminum storm windows, as long as they're not like raw aluminum. The board, to my knowledge, has never awarded a grant for aluminum storm windows. And the grant application talks about storm windows can be covered at 25% of the cost by the grant, but they have to be wood. So that's kind of what the board has always approved in the past for storm windows is wood. So this would be, you'd be setting a new precedent if you wanted to award a grant for aluminum storm windows. The window repair, so the window repair cost is $420. So you, if a grant for that would be $210. And then the storm window cost, half of it, because they want to phase the project, is $6,000 and change. And so the additional $790 would then cover the storm windows. So your grant could be for $1,000 if you wanted to award it for both pieces of the project.
Right. $800 would be going to the windows. Or something like
So we are setting a precedent.
The other option could, I mean,
You
the
could
board,
make-
because this work isn't going to happen in the next month, you know, the grant would be awarded starting July 1. They do the work later. You could request, kind of put it on hold and request that they come back with a sample, if you want to see a sample. You know, I mean, you have some options.
I'm sure the aluminum option is a lot less expensive than the wood option. By far. But I don't know that the board would want to set a precedent in so much that it might be a site-specific situation. That something like that would have to be reviewed on a case-by-case, not a
Oh, it
blanket.
always-
Well, this is
Right.
the grant application, so.
Which
That's
we
what I'm
would do
saying,
anyway.
it's the money part, right?
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
really supposed to award it to something that's not wood.
So.
I have a, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh. On the project bids, it says the bid is for 13 forest green aluminum storm windows and 10 mill finish windows. What is
What is
the
a mill
mill
finish?
finish? Is that not painted?
That's an error, they're all being finished.
Got it.
Yeah, but that's not what it says.
I have a recommended condition of approval for the grant that would not allow the mill finish.
Oh,
I
okay.
think, you know, regardless
I just
of
saw
whether
that,
that
and
was
I'm
a
like-
mistake or not, we would condition it to say
They all have
only
to
the
be-
enameled finish.
And when you think of enamel though, I think of shiny.
No, that's why it'd be satin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enamel, satin enamel or enamel satin finish or
Well,
whatever.
enamel's the paint. But it would be a satin finish.
Finish, okay.
What I was gonna say is that the 790, so here in the application, storm windows would only be, grant would be no more than 25% for wood frame storm windows. The 790 is 12.5%. So that's half of what, you know,
Half of what the max could be.
for wood frame. So we're still, you know, you could say that we're, well, for aluminum, we're having the
You could say for aluminum, 790 is max.
Which is what's in there.
Which is
So
right there,
so it's still a lower
12.5%.
limit than,
You could do that. I mean, some's better than nothing, I guess.
And the applicant does plan to come back and do the second phase of storm windows next year and ask for another grant.
Yeah. Say something like that. Let's keep moving.
I would return to the concept of preservation. I wouldn't wrap it in aluminum foil for preservation, but a tastefully constructed window frame. I put a lot of credibility in the assertion that it looks natural, looks appropriate and compatible.
That it has to match, as close as. The new ones too, with the.
The color?
Yeah, the color and stuff, because, when you look at this and then you look at this and as,
They won't
with the
perfectly
fade-
match, but if Denise
No.
is saying they're gonna match, they're gonna be matching to something that's a bit weathered.
Yeah.
Once he's got the paint
Right.
in a can that can be matched.
But, when it's up there, eventually.
Well, he doesn't sound like a guy that would be skirting on any of it.
No,
Yeah.
he is a stickler
Yeah.
for, I'd vouch for that, that he would go, I think, probably over and above a lot of our applicants in
Yeah.
making sure that it does match.
Okay.
yeah, to me, they meet the goal of preserving the original windows, which is the whole point. So I'll move to approve at $1,000 for, my thing is frozen, but
I'll
for
second it.
1933 PG 1901.
I'll second.
Oh,
All right, moved and seconded. Hold the board.
Okay, Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Knight?
fine.
Board Member Hoffman?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
Chair Bateman?
Aye. So you can
And
tell the applicants that they have good news waiting for them. And the second preservation grant request
they can go ahead.
is one that we have previously approved and which the applicant now wants to expand or increase. Staff report.
Thanks. This grant request is for 803 Fifth Avenue in Kenema. This is the Edward Newtall House. The previous approval is for $1,000 for porch repair. The project cost is a little over $4,000. The project just, so they haven't done any work until very recently. And when they learned that we had a lot of grant funds left over in the grant cycle, they applied for more. So, and the additional request is for $1,133.50, which would bring them up to exactly 50% of their project cost. So they would be, if this were approved, they would get a total of $2,133.50. The previous discussions that we had were that, this is for a porch rebuild. Originally, they had included the deck railing or the porch railing in the bid, and they took that out. So the $4,267 project cost does not include the railing. And that was because we didn't have evidence that there was an original railing on this house. And so it's a new feature, we're presuming, so the grant would not pay for that portion of the project. Let's see. So here were some of the original photos of the rot in the existing porch. And then here are some of their building plans are really faded, sorry about that. And then this is actually a photo that they sent me today of some of the work that had just got started to demo the porch. And they do plan to work on it this month, or sorry, June, so that they would be finished with it before the end of the budget cycle, and it would fit within that budget cycle.
That looks like plaster.
And they're here as well.
Anybody have a comment on that? Do the applicants wish to speak?
Is,
This is bad.
without the green,
Yeah, please.
lots of advice.
Introduce yourself, one of the owners.
Amy O'Gara, I'm one of the owners of 803 Fifth Avenue. My mom and I own it.
And I'm Sarah Brown, one of the workers, also a family friend, so.
Okay. Tell us about your project.
Originally, yeah. Originally, they had used, it looks like leftover shiplap to go vertical there to cover underneath. It's hard to tell that it's shiplap in that picture, but if you look closely, you can see that 7.25 shiplap.
Okay.
But somebody at some point had used chicken wire, which is what they use for like mastic type siding,
Put the stucco on it.
stucco siding, yeah, and then they covered it with concrete, and so, and that's all dilapidated too, but as you can see, we peeled that layer off so you could see what was there. But what we proposed to do was use shiplap underneath that fascia piece. Obviously, that fascia piece is going to be, everything's going to get replaced because it's all rotten, but we're going to replace it with another fascia piece and then use shiplap horizontally underneath there to match what's actually underneath the masonite or asbestos siding there. So in hope that someday that will be removed and it will be brought back to its original beauty.
I don't have any questions.
Any questions? No questions? Okay.
You're taking a lot of the, excuse me, I did have one, we don't need a railing, is it under, what's the building code? 30, okay, and that looks like it's, okay.
It's,
I don't think it was a question of whether it
July.
required.
Yes, it'll be finished.
Question is
Right.
whether,
It would be covered under the grant.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Shiplap looks like it's same.
The shiplap on the sidewalk there is previously, that's what we just purchased. The stuff on the sidewalk there.
Oh.
That's all,
Yeah,
what,
Because I was gonna
that's
say, you look
what
like
we're
you
gonna be using,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the stuff underneath is pretty rotten.
Yeah.
There might be some short pieces we might be able to use, fit in certain places, but mostly everything had to be replaced.
Yeah, that stack of old woods to replace this. The old, but it's cool. It's so cool.
Do you have any other questions?
I can make a motion to approve PG 18-02. Second.
Moved and seconded.
Board Member Stowe?
Aye.
Board Member Vett? Aye. Board Member McLaughlin?
Aye.
Board Member Blythe?
Aye.
Chair Basinger?
Aye.
Go.
Thank you very
You
much.
are good to go.
Thank you.
Go forth and get 14.
The next item on the agenda is a letter of support for a transportation and growth management program. Grant update. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so our department's applying for a few different grants to update our comprehensive plan. We last updated it in 2004, so the comprehensive plan has several different sections, and one of them is Goal 5 resources, natural resources and historic resources. So historic preservation is folded into our comp plan. And because of that, our director requested that the Historic Review Board write a letter of support to submit with the grant application. It's for $150,000 that would fund a portion of the work to update the comprehensive plan. And the city commission in their 2019-2021 goals and priorities included the update of the comp plan as one of those items. And so the letter has been drafted up, and if you all want to make any changes to it, we can do that. If you want to approve it, then we could ask Ken to sign it tonight, and it would go in as part of our grant application.
I read it.
Looks great.
Do you have to have that approved?
I
Yeah,
think you all need to vote on it, and the city commission, all of the planning commission, city commission, CIC, they're all being asked to provide a letter of support as well.
I would entertain a motion then to approve it as written.
I move that we approve, oh God, I don't, PC 19-050 letter of support for Transportation Growth Management Program grant.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know how to say it.
Aye. The ayes have it.
Kevin, do that.
Copy I have, I'd sign it, but it has lines
I have a
across it
copy right
because
here for
my
you.
printer is
Before you
no
leave
good.
tonight.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's okay.
You're forever indebted.
I have no life. Communications.
Just to clarify, the design advice we're not going to do because the applicant didn't come.
Okay.
Roger.
Well,
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. I thank you for dealing with the packed agenda tonight. I didn't anticipate that, but it just kind of happened. One announcement I have is that our May 30th History Pub event in Midway is canceled because our speaker had a death in the family.
oh dear.
So that won't happen this year. We could maybe think about doing a History Pub for next year's celebration. And then you may or may not meet our intern at the next meeting. She will have started by then, and we'll have, her name's Lydia Ness, and she previously worked for Restore Oregon, and now she's in the Master's Urban Regional Planning program at Portland State, and is going to be between year 1 and year 2 of that program this summer.
Is that a paid internship?
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. And we're paying her through the CLG grant.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn.
Yay.
Thank you.
The hammer has dropped.
2 hours.